Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. In the hours after Kyle's shocking slap and Harrison's heartbreaking tears, the entire Abbott mansion felt like a pressure cooker ready to explode, yet even as the emotional fallout settled into an eerie silence, there was something darker simmering beneath the surface, something that even Kyle, in all his anger and disappointment, couldn't yet comprehend. The question on everyone's mind was simple: could Harrison somehow pull Kyle and Claire back together? But the answer was about to become infinitely more complicated, because the truth, the real truth about Claire and Holden, was lurking like a venomous shadow ready to strike. As Harrison sat on the edge of his bed, his small hand still trembling from witnessing the painful confrontation between the two adults he loved most, he whispered to himself words no child should ever have to say: "I have to fix this. I have to tell the truth." And Claire, standing alone outside in the cold night air, her bruised pride stinging as much as the mark Kyle's hand left on her cheek, tried to steady her breath. But Claire wasn't just shaken by the slap, she was shaken because she knew that Kyle was dangerously close to discovering secrets she had buried for years. Secrets involving her past with Holden, the man who wasn't just a friend, not just a colleague, not just a supporter during her darkest times, but something far deeper, darker, and more twisted than Kyle could ever imagine. Holden wasn't simply someone who helped her after the cult, he was someone who had been with her long before Kyle Abbott ever came into the picture. He was tied to her trauma, to her manipulation, to her emotional conditioning, and worst of all, Holden believed that Claire belonged to him, and him alone. As Claire stared at the moonlit driveway, she knew Kyle would eventually learn that Holden wasn't just a lingering presence from her past. He was her handler, her protector, her controller, her something more, and she hated herself for it. She hated that Holden still had influence over her life, over her decisions, and over the way she expressed love. The slap from Kyle hurt her pride, but the possibility of Kyle discovering the truth about Holden terrified her all the way to her soul. Inside the house, Kyle paced, raking his fingers through his hair, unable to understand why his emotions were spinning out of control. Yes, Claire had hurt him. Yes, she had lied, again. But there was something else gnawing at him, something Harrison had started to mumble when he was crying. "Daddy." Claire was scared. Claire said someone was watching us. Claire said she had to hide things so he wouldn't get mad. Kyle stopped pacing. The cold, sharp realization cut through him. He? Claire had mentioned a he months ago but quickly brushed it off. Kyle had assumed it was a memory from the cult, a leftover ghost from her trauma. But what if it wasn't? What if it was someone real, someone alive, someone manipulating her right now? And as Kyle replayed Harrison's shaky confession, he felt the anger he had unleashed on Claire twist into guilt. Yet he also felt something else: dread. Dread that something bigger, darker, and far more dangerous was swirling around Claire than he ever realized. And for the first time since the slap, Kyle felt fear, not for himself, but for Claire. At that exact moment, across town, Holden stood in a dimly lit warehouse, staring at a wall of photographs of Claire at the Abbott mansion, Claire at Jabot, Claire picking Harrison up from school, Claire kissing Kyle on the cheek, Claire crying alone on a bench outside society. And every single picture had been taken without her knowledge. Holden's eyes glimmered with a mix of obsession and madness as he traced his finger over Claire's face. "She's slipping away," he murmured. "She thinks she can choose him? Kyle Abbott?" Holden let out a laugh, one without humor, one drenched in dominance. "No. She belongs to me. She always has." And then he looked down at the file open on the table, filled with documents that revealed the truth about Claire's past, how he had been placed in her life long before she ever escaped the cult, how he had shaped her behaviors, how he had fed her certain fears and helped maintain her dependency. Holden wasn't just a man from her past. He was the architect of her brokenness. The puppeteer behind her nightmares. The overseer of her emotional training. And worst of all, he was still convinced that Claire needed him, and could never be free from him. But what Holden never expected was that Harrison, sweet, innocent, intuitive Harrison, had already sensed something was off. Children are perceptive in ways adults often overlook. Harrison had overheard Claire whispering into the phone late at night, her voice trembling as she said, "Please don't come here, Holden. Please don't scare them. I'll do what you want, just leave them alone." Those words replayed in his mind like a haunting loop. And as Harrison wiped his tears and tiptoed downstairs, he saw Claire walking toward her car with her coat wrapped tight around her, her steps shaky, her shoulders tense. Harrison didn't know the full story. But he knew that Claire wasn't the villain. She was scared. She was trapped. She was protecting him and Kyle. "Claire," he cried out, running to her with desperation burning in his voice. Claire turned, startled, and dropped her keys. Harrison threw his arms around her, burying his face against her. "Don't go," he whispered. "Please don't leave us. I know the truth. You're not bad. You're just scared of that man, that Holden." Claire froze. Tears filled her eyes instantly. Harrison knew. He shouldn't know, but he did. And now she had no choice but to confront everything she'd been terrified of confronting. But Harrison didn't stop there. With determination far beyond his young age, he pulled Claire's hand and said, "Come inside. Daddy needs to hear the truth. He needs to know everything." Claire shook her head frantically. "No, Harrison. You don't understand. If your father knows, Holden will," but Harrison cut her off. "He won't hurt us. Daddy will protect you. He loves you." Those words, "he loves you," struck Claire like a dagger to the heart. Because deep down, she knew Harrison was right. Kyle did love her, even when he was angry, even when he doubted her, even when he lost control and hit her. Love didn't excuse violence, but in that moment, she understood his pain came from fear. Fear of losing her. Fear of being manipulated again. Fear of betrayal. Claire took a shaky breath, nodded, and followed Harrison back into the house. Inside, Kyle spun around the moment he heard the door open. Claire stood trembling, eyes wet, cheeks flushed, and Kyle's heart dropped into his stomach. Harrison stood in front of her like a tiny warrior. "Daddy," he said softly but firmly, "Claire has to tell you something. But you can't get mad. You have to listen. You hit her, and that was wrong." Kyle's face burned with shame as tears stung his eyes. He knelt down. "You're right, buddy. You're absolutely right." Harrison continued, "She didn't lie because she wanted to hurt you. She lied because she's scared of a bad man. A man named Holden." And there it was. The name. The name that made Claire's entire body go rigid, and Kyle's breath freeze in his chest. Claire's voice cracked as she finally said, "Kyle. I have to tell you everything. Holden isn't who you think he is. He isn't from the cult. He isn't from my recovery. He's something else." And for the next 30 minutes, Claire poured out the truth, how Holden had infiltrated her life, how he had manipulated her emotionally, how he had convinced her she needed him to survive, how he had controlled her decisions, how he had convinced her that she could never love someone without his permission. Kyle listened in silent disbelief, his heart twisting with anger, not at Claire, but at himself, for not seeing this sooner, and at Holden, for stealing years of Claire's freedom. By the time she finished, Kyle stepped forward and gently cupped her face, not with anger, not with accusation, but with love. "Claire," he whispered, voice thick with emotion, "I should have protected you. I should have believed in you. I'm sorry." Claire broke down in his arms, and Harrison, with a relieved smile, wrapped his arms around both of them. And for the first time in hours, there was a fragile sense of hope in the Abbott home. But the moment of peace was shattered when a cold gust of wind swept through the living room as the front door creaked open. Kyle instinctively pulled Claire behind him. Harrison clutched Claire's leg. And standing there, in the doorway, with a smirk that chilled the blood of everyone in the room, was Holden. His eyes locked onto Claire's trembling form. "There you are," he said softly, dangerously. I told you, Claire. You don't get to walk away from me. Kyle stepped forward, fury burning through every vein. Over my dead body. Holden smiled. If that's what it takes. And just like that, the war for Claire's freedom, and for Kyle and Claire's shattered love, had begun. This moment, this intersection of heartbreak, truth, and raw vulnerability, was the crossroads neither Claire nor Kyle could avoid. Claire finally met Kyle's eyes fully. I was trying to protect you, she whispered. I was scared. Kyle squeezed her hand gently. And I let my fear turn into anger, he admitted. But if someone is threatening you, threatening us, then I'm not letting you face that alone. Claire inhaled sharply, the weight visibly lifting just enough to let hope filter through. Harrison watched them, his heartbeat slowing as he saw their hands intertwined again. For the first time in days, he smiled, small, fragile, but real. Could Harrison reconnect Claire and Kyle's love once again? Perhaps this was the moment. Not the moment where everything was magically fixed, but the moment where they drew the first deep breath toward healing. Because sometimes it isn't grand gestures or perfect words that mend a fractured love, sometimes it's the raw honesty of a child who sees love with clarity adults forget they once had. Sometimes it takes a broken plea to reveal what truly matters. And as Claire leaned slowly into Kyle's embrace and he held her with trembling remorse, Harrison wrapped his small arms around both of them, sealing the promise that whatever darkness hunted Claire, whatever fear drove them apart, their love, messy, wounded, imperfect, still had a chance to survive. And maybe, just maybe, Harrison would be the one to save it. The air in the Abbott living room still crackled with emotion, but now it carried a different charge, one of fragile hope rather than destruction. Kyle held Claire gently, his arms trembling from the memory of what he had done, the shame burning deep in his chest. Claire clung to him with caution, her face pressed to his shoulder, as if afraid the moment might shatter if she moved too quickly. Harrison stood between them, small hands resting on their arms, ensuring neither pulled away. To him, this wasn't just reconciliation, it was survival. His world was stitched together by the love of the two people standing before him, and if that thread snapped, he feared everything else in his life would unravel with it. The house fell quiet, the storm outside finally tapering to a soft drizzle tapping against the windows. Kyle exhaled shakily and touched Claire's cheek, careful, reverent, where the red mark from his slap lingered. Claire didn't flinch. Instead, she placed her hand over his, a silent signal that she wasn't giving up. Not on him, not on them. We need to talk, Kyle whispered, but his voice held none of the sharp edges it had before. Claire nodded, her heartbeat loud against his chest. But before either could speak further, Harrison tugged on Kyle's sleeve. Can you promise me something first? He asked, voice small, tremulous. Harrison sighed in relief, but something still weighed on his small shoulders. He shifted, biting his lip. There's more I have to tell you, he whispered. Claire and Kyle both tensed. Harrison took a deep breath, the kind that lifted his tiny chest before he finally spoke. I didn't just hear Claire's phone call. His voice wavered. I saw something. And I didn't know who to tell. Kyle leaned closer, heart racing. What did you see, buddy? Harrison's fingers fidgeted with the dinosaur. A lady came to my school. Claire's blood ran cold. Kyle froze. What? Claire whispered. Harrison nodded nervously. She didn't talk to me. But she looked at me. Really long. And she told the teacher she was a friend of the family, asking when my dad picks me up. Harrison swallowed, looking between them. I think it was the bad lady. Claire's hand flew to her mouth. Kyle's heart dropped into his stomach. Harrison, Kyle said, keeping his voice steady with effort, what did she look like? Harrison's brow furrowed as he tried to remember. She had dark hair. Straight. She had a long coat. And she smelled like, he paused, crinkling his nose. Like lemons. And smoke. And she smiled, but not a nice smile. Claire's whole body shook. It's her, she whispered. It's Melinda. Kyle stood abruptly, pacing, running both hands through his hair. Anger flared again, but this time, it wasn't directed at Claire. She's getting too close. She's not just threatening you anymore, Claire. She's coming after our son. Claire's chest tightened at the word our, because Kyle wasn't even thinking, he had said it instinctively, emotionally, possessively. Harrison wasn't biologically hers, but hearing Kyle speak as though they were a family bound together was almost enough to break her all over again. We need security, Kyle muttered. We need to tell my dad. We need cameras. Protection. I should call Christine or Chance, hell, I should call Victor if I have to. Claire reached for him, her voice shaking. Kyle, if you tell everyone, Melinda will panic. She'll lash out. That's what she does. She destroys whatever scares her. Kyle turned back toward her, breath heaving. She's not going to scare this family. Claire blinked at the word family again. Twice in one night. Twice from a man who had slapped her hours ago, but who now looked at her like she was the person he wanted to protect more than anything. Harrison stood and walked toward Kyle, placing a tiny hand on his father's shaking fist. Daddy, he whispered, you can protect us, but Claire needs you too. Kyle dropped to his knees again, pulling Harrison tightly into his arms. I won't let anything happen to either of you, he whispered fiercely. I swear it. Claire rose slowly and approached them. This time, Kyle reached out his free hand without thinking, inviting her into the embrace. She sank down beside them, letting herself be pulled against his chest. Harrison wrapped both arms around them, creating the smallest, most fragile circle of protection, but a circle powerful enough to shift the entire night. Minutes passed in silence. Eventually, Harrison's breathing softened as his exhaustion caught up with him. Kyle carried him upstairs, tucking him gently into bed. Claire followed, her presence calming the boy almost instantly. Stay, Harrison whispered, eyes half closed. Claire sat on one side of the bed, Kyle on the other. Harrison took both their hands as he drifted off, like he refused to let go until he was sure they were one unit again. When he finally slept, Kyle and Claire slipped quietly into the hallway. For a moment, they simply stood there, facing each other in the dim light. The vulnerability between them was almost unbearable. Kyle stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Claire. I don't deserve your forgiveness, he whispered. But I'm begging you for it anyway. Claire's eyes shimmered. Kyle, I'm not innocent in this either. I hid things. I let fear control me. She reached up, touching the side of his face. We've both hurt each other. But we can fix this. If you still want to. Kyle caught her hand, pressing it gently to his cheek. I want you more now than ever. But I want us to be safe first. And I want you to trust me enough to tell me everything. Claire nodded. I'm ready. Then, with a trembling inhale, Kyle whispered, what exactly does Melinda want from you? Claire closed her eyes. She wants me to steal evidence. To infiltrate the Abbott finances. To sabotage Jabot from the inside. She wants to bury your family in scandals so she can manipulate the fallout. Kyle's jaw clenched. Why? Claire looked up, a haunting expression clouding her face. Because Melinda isn't working alone, there's someone else. Someone who wants your family destroyed. Someone who believes you deserve to lose everything. Kyle's blood ran cold. Who? Claire hesitated, fear slicing across her face. I don't know yet, she admitted. But Melinda keeps calling him the benefactor. She says he's powerful. That he has connections everywhere. And that if I don't obey, he'll take Harrison. The world stopped. Kyle's breath left him entirely. He threatened my son? Claire nodded, tears pouring. I couldn't tell you. I was terrified. I thought if you knew, you'd send me away. And then you wouldn't be able to protect him. Kyle pulled her into his arms so suddenly she gasped, holding her as though he feared she might disappear. I'm not sending you anywhere, he murmured fiercely. You're staying here. With us. Where you belong. Claire's body trembled as she melted into him. Kyle, she whispered, voice breaking. I love you. The confession slipped out like a secret she had been holding in for too long. Kyle froze, pulling back just enough to see her face. Claire's eyes widened slightly, fear and hope battling within them. Kyle cupped her face gently.